Okay. Well, as we have seen, now that the insurrection, the overthrow of the Tsar has taken place, and the proletariat seems to be in motion, and the Bolsheviks seem to be more and more the representative of the workers. The question that now must be faced internally regards the party program and the party position in general. As regards the most important question, the workers, we deal with it to some extent, but we also have to deal with the other question. Now that everything seems to be moving in a revolutionary direction, as far as the capital is concerned, and also in Moscow and in some of the provinces, the question that has to be dealt with is the question of the peasantry. And that is a question that, for the first time, must appear to Trotsky that he is vulnerable. It is a proletarian revolution, but the urgent need is the peasantry. How to win the peasantry. It was all good and well to argue with the Bolsheviks on the nature of the forthcoming revolution, and to show in so many ways that that's what will happen and is happening. But the other side of the polemic with Lenin was on the dictatorship of the democratic dictatorship of the workers and peasants. And now, after the overthrow of the Tsar, it must appear to Trotsky that the urgent need is to have an alliance with the peasants. And how Lenin's formula, the democratic dictatorship of the workers and peasants, appeals to the peasants. And when they come to the capital, they want to see Lenin. Trotsky has a problem when he faces a delegation of peasants. Lenin is the one who has the slogan that counts them in. Trotsky's slogan, and especially the slander against him, counts him out. And it is a very important problem. It is then where sometimes slogans come back to haunt you or to help you. So whereas the democratic dictatorship of the workers and the peasants was too algebraic, and so far as how the revolution unfolded, yet Trotsky could not but see the wisdom of Lenin's position, could see that not only the wisdom, the sagacity and the craftiness behind it, that it was a way to win the peasants, to win them. And sometimes no amount of talk by Trotsky could undo that, see. Not much is written about that aspect of it, but it was certainly very much important in the practical relationships of the party leaders with the masses. Having a poor image with the peasantry at a time after the insurrection was harmful to Trotsky as a leader. It militated against his rousing popularity, see. In the army, in the ranks of workers, and in intellectual cycles particularly. He was the one who could write for many more publications than anybody else and get a hearing abroad quicker, if I understand it properly, than even Lenin. It was Trotsky who was in New York and not Lenin, who propagated for the party as a whole. It was Trotsky who was in Spain, in France, in Italy, all over. And wherever he went, he built a tremendous reputation in the general population, mostly working class. But now he's faced with another problem. The peasantry. See? Lenin has no problem. Delegations that come to see Lenin and Trotsky, they right away run to Lenin as somebody else because they see them as their leaders. Trotsky has another problem. Peasants are known to be much more susceptible to anti-Semitism than workers. He has to guard against that. And yet to maintain his position as a leader of the revolution. See? We need to take up those problems that we would take up that are not very well explained in books, that we have to use our own imagination, as Comatou will be in the struggle, and know. A black revolutionary leader that has to come into a white town in Mississippi has a problem. A white one in a black area may have a problem too, of a different kind. Nationality is important when you present yourself to the public, and who the public is at a particular time if you're seeking mass support. Quite a number of members of the enlarged Central Committee were from the peasants. Not very influential, but very important. Now, in this book that I can't find the quotation right now, that's why I'm speaking off the cuff most of the time, Lenin is meeting with Trotsky is meeting with a delegation of peasants. And it's an opportunity for him, see. And he's telling him, look, you are the masters of this house. This house belongs to you. You are the leaders of it. You're along with the workers you lead. You're the leaders of it, see. And surely that should be persuasive when he and in his capacity as a leader, is saying this. At this time, he may be either the foreign minister or the defense minister. He had at least one of the two posts. He's second in command. But it is becoming evident that being in command and having the leadership is very important officially. But you also have to have your ear to the ground as to whether you are popular with the masses. Trotsky was very popular in Petrograd and in Leningrad, in Petrograd and in Moscow. He always had the largest audience, and the audiences were rousing for him. They always asked for him. But those were audiences of workers. Or politicals. It's another matter when you're stretching out over the vast land of the U.S., of old Russia with its millions and millions of peasants. And you have to see them the way they are, that they are mainly interested in the land and how to get it. And that's Trotsky. He always pointed out that the peasantry was more concerned with the land and not with the proletarian revolution as a whole. A lot of this has to be understood as you get down to the masses. As you get down, and even though it is a dictatorship of the proletariat, you nevertheless cannot rely on that. You need to get mass support. The proletariat is a minority class. To try now more than ever to widen the area of Bolshevik support, because no sooner have we taken over, no sooner are we the dictatorship of the proletariat, and soon enough we have the anti-imperialist bourgeoisie against us. See? All right. We can win the peasantry because we have the soldiers. I assume Trotsky would say that many times. And the peasant soldiers are with us. And that is eminently true. But the soldiers want to go home. They don't want to stay in the army. As long as they're in the army, they are a disciplined army under the leadership of Trotsky. And his leadership is eminently regarded everywhere. But the army wants to go home. They want to land. That's what has been promised to them all along. And if we don't release them, if we don't demobilize, they will start going there by themselves and deserting their posts. And the possibility of organizing an army without the backing of millions of peasants will become more and more difficult. That has to be borne in mind by us in discussing the permanent revolution. See? It has to be borne in mind. It has to be borne in mind the difference between Lenin and Trotsky as strategists and tacticians as well. They both had an unusual sense as to where they are in history, and an understanding the mass movement at certain times. But understanding them and seeing the movement change under new circumstances is something else. The longer the struggle continues, the more difficult it gets for Trotsky to uphold himself as the most popular leader, sometimes more popular than Lenin. But the situation is changing. More and more peasants become officials, and properly so. And they hold their congresses and have organizations. And more of the working class become organized, and the more backward elements of the workers come in too. That is very important, organizing them so that they do not become captives of the bourgeoisie. See, being able to do this and maintain that the dictatorship of the proletariat under iron discipline becomes more and more a problem on how do you administer the new worker state. See? This is important. See? I'm glad I raised the question of the peasantry in its proper historical perspective. Trotsky was masterly in organizing the Red Army. But the Red Army was not to be a permanent institution with millions and millions of peasants in it. Who could afford it? Not Russia. Who could afford to have them? If we would not release them, they would desert. And besides that, who's going to feed the population if not the new soldiers coming up? The peasantry become very key. How to deal with them was very important, and having the right people to deal with the peasantry becomes important. I, as a city worker, I don't know how I would do in rural Alabama, but if you need a representative from the party, I think we'd better send Bill Dorries down there, who's at least from South Carolina, that knows what to do. We'll get John Anderson back and some other. We need to have workers from all areas and to win them over. They can go into areas where it is easier for them to explain the party program and to promote working class internationalism, working class solidarity with the oppressed people everywhere. See? That's a big job for the workers, an ultimate big job. Now, these are parts of my understanding of the issue as to how the revolution went. We all know that Trotsky, as I said, became the chairman of the St. Petersburg Soviet when he came back the second time to Russia, and immediately became the chairman of the St. Petersburg Soviet. I said that at the last time, but I think I'm mistaken. I think I'm mistaken that he was the chairman of the St. Petersburg Soviet. But what I'm not mistaken is that he became the chairman of the Military Revolutionary Committee. That's what he became. And it was the Military Revolutionary Committee that planned the insurrection and carried it through. See? That is of undeniable significance, and neither Stalin nor the older CP nor the new people that are in the South, in Russia, can deny that, because it was a fact carried through the world press everywhere. He organized it, but under the leadership of Lenin, see. He organized it. Lenin oversaw the whole operation. But he's the one that was right at the controls. And having done that, he had organized the first successful proletarian revolution in Russia. Now, at this time, I would like to call to your attention as to how to read the history of the Russian Revolution. See, there is, first of all, Trotsky's history in 3 volumes. That's more extensive than any that I know. And I dare say I haven't read many more than that of Trotsky's and John Reed's book and several smaller portions. But we all were brought up, at least in the Trotskyist movement, as it was during Trotsky's lifetime, by reading his account of the Russian Revolution. And it is explicit and illuminating and readable as only a genius of a writer knows how to do. It has one fault, and I can't explain how in the world that happened, see, is that he has hundreds and hundreds of quotations from leaders and rank-and-file workers and peasants and everywhere. But he doesn't give the source. He being the most controversial one in Russia, particularly, and having no credibility with the CP after Lenin's death, how in the world could he write this book and have all these quotations and not give the source? Now, some of those who follow Trotsky's writings say that they check the sources, the people at the Harvard University, and they find the sources to be accurate. But who are they? And how can you get credibility for it, see? It's utterly inexplicable to me, but it does have this. You read it and you feel that it is correct and that it is honest as the day is worn. That the way it's described, hundreds of quotations from different leaders and so on, but the sources are not given. I know when I write an article, Comrade Deirdre or David, the first thing I'll say, well, where's your source for this? And pretty soon, I spend more time getting the source than writing the article. But it's necessary to put it in, except if it's well known, then okay, you let it go. But it's very important to give the source. Now, aside from Trotsky's history, which is the main source, there's also John Reed's book, 10 Days That Shook the World. See? That was written almost in the heat of the revolution. Now, John Reed, I should state, was a Harvard student who, like some others, became very excellent reporters. But he soon became one of the contributors of The Masses, which is a radical, magazine. Something like The Guardian, but very revolutionary. Nothing like The Guardian. I see we're in the right company, yay. He did that, see. And he covered a big strike in New York. I don't have the name of it right now. A big strike, and proved himself to be an excellent labor reporter. He went to Mexico and supported the revolutionary side. So all over he was a and when he got to Russia, that was the big thing in his life, to be able to report the Russian Revolution. He had previously reported on the imperialist war. Top-notch professor and revolutionary. And so he wrote 10 Days That Shook the World, which is a short book, and gives the best account. Now, I couldn't find the first edition of the book, which is important. Now, do I have it anywhere? Okay, thank you. Where does it start? Now, there are many different editions of this book and many different interpretations, but the original one is the one that I'm concerned with. I want to thank Comrade Desiree for finding it for me so that I could read a very important paragraph or two in it. It's important, these 2 or 3 paragraphs, because they're written by Lenin. See, Lenin writing a sort of an introduction to this book. And I'd like to read to you what he says. Introduction by Lenin, it says, with the greatest interest, with never slackening attention, I read John Reed's book, 10 Days That Shook the World. Unreservedly do I recommend it to the workers of the world. Here is a book which I should like to see published in millions of copies and translated in all languages of the world. It gives a truthful and most vivid exposition of the events so significant to the comprehension of what really is the proletarian revolution and the dictatorship of the proletarian. The problems are vividly discussed, but before one can accept or reject these ideas, he must understand the full significance of his discussion. John Reed's book will undoubtedly help to clear this question, which is the fundamental problem of the universal workers' movement. The word universal doesn't really sound right, but it's probably a poor translation. So, you see, here's Lenin writing about this book, 10 Days That Shook the World. And it's a very good and illuminating book. I read it many years ago. I didn't find it as interesting as Trotsky's book, Natural, in later years, which goes into more detail and is more oriented with the factions. But this is the source book. This is what Lenin considered the revolution, and he unreservedly recommended it, and he put his name on it. And if we want to get Lenin's view of the revolution at that time, that's it. There could be no doubt about it. John Reed was considered such an important figure in revolutionary history of Russia. He died there, and he's the only one that's buried in the Kremlin who was a foreigner. I don't know if that's a distinction, but kind of a hero in literature, and particularly in reporting. Now, the problem with the book is not a problem with the book, there's no problem. The problem is with the leaders of the revolution. They look at this book and say, well, where am I here? Where am I? Where am I Trotsky? Where am I Stalin? Where am I Martha? Maybe I'm not here at all. What's Lenin doing all this? What's the idea endorsing a book by a foreigner? Nevertheless, that is the book. And I think if we want to seriously consider the revolution, we must consider it from the point of view of Lenin first. We have to, in our period, not have so much of an exposition of the relations of Stalin to Trotsky, or Trotsky to Stalin, and what their struggle was about, which is very, very important. But we must see it from where Lenin is sitting, and how Lenin views the struggle between them. See? We are Leninists first, as Trotsky said later. We are Leninists first. And Lenin writes from the point of view of the party. And he discusses Lenin and Trotsky. He's got the party in mind. And when they wants to suggest to remove Stalin from a post, it's in the interest of the party. If he can see his way clear in not removing him, he will do that. He will do what is necessary for the party, for the development of the party. He is head and shoulders above them all, and they are, most of all, in a lot of ways, his pupils. He can write a letter, as you can see, saying that he's going to resign and all that, but nobody's going to listen to it. He has prestige and authority over and above that which is necessary to be the premier leader. Over and over again, he's looking for new people to get into the party, writing and saying, well, there's a new guy that just comes from this area, and I think he's wonderful. Look him up. Get him into it. See to it that he gets development, and so on. He or she. That's Lenin all over. But with the party as a whole, after the insurrection and after their power, they're not so anxious to get new people. There's now comradely rivalry and cooperation, even under the best of circumstances. What leader gets in what post? When you write an article for Pravda, what kind of space do you get, or are you get any? See? All of these things come in important. See, we're attempting to develop a revolutionary class-conscious workers' club. We've got to deal with a lot of these problems, as we are. And we learn how, from the Bolshevik Party, how they dealt with it. How you can leave a problem alone and let it fester for a while, and maybe it'll die by itself, but how to vigorously intervene so that it doesn't get any worse. And contrary to what has often been said, that the Bolshevik Party is undemocratic and so on, overall it's not true. It is undemocratic only in the sense that it doesn't allow indiscipline. But even in Stalin's time, the care was in expelling. See, it's only after it began to go backwards, see, that's what happened. Now, We've got to leave this time just after the insurrection and the way, and that's really the victory after the Trotsky as the military revolutionary leader of the committee. The party has the power. And how from the very beginning it's a question as who gets what post under these circumstances. And whereas just a few months ago, when the Bolsheviks had to run for their life, and people were deserting the party because it seemed that the counter-revolution was going to win. Right now, with victory having been attained in a military way, all of them are all coming back. And a lot of people are pushing and elbowing their way into the party. But it takes only a year and a half or two when the Bolsheviks again are under threat of being destroyed by a combination of imperialist powers, and when a lot of people who were in suddenly had disappeared and they're not around, and when you need them for a meeting, they're not there, or they're sick, or their mother is sick, or whatever. They're not at meetings where they should be, and they're not at the place of work either. And the situation requires iron discipline, and no one speaks more about iron discipline than Lenin. But on the contrary, it is not of a vindictive type. I just want to add one more sentence before we conclude this part. In order to be able to carry the dictatorship through, as soon as the imperialists began to invade and the bourgeoisie got more confidence in itself and began to attack the Bolsheviks from all sides and even attempted to assassinate Lenin, the Bolsheviks organized a campaign that, which in so many words said this: you, the bourgeoisie at home and the imperialists abroad, you are organizing a white terror against us. You are terrorizing it. You're using terrorist methods to destroy our party, to destroy our individuals, to break up the functioning of discipline in the factories. You're sabotaging transportation and everything. You're carrying out a white terror. Well, that being the case, we're organizing a red terror against you. And let me tell you, that was the right thing to do. See, this was very important in saving the revolution. There might have been excesses here and there, but that goes with the situation. So it's not just Stalin that was for terror. First of all, the bourgeoisie organized the terror. And then Lenin organized the Red Terror. And it had to be that if the Republic, if the Socialist Republic would survive. So before we even think of considering the terror that was organized by Stalin at a later date, let's see the sequence of events so that we'll be able to understand the process altogether as a social process from the very beginning to the end. We have got to master this as a tool to organize the hundreds of thousands and the millions in this country. It is necessary for us to understand how the most skillful and the most revolutionary leaders dealt with a situation that is very much what we will have to consider and which we consider daily in our lives. When we study the party from various points of view, we can see ourselves and our problems. That is why we study it. And because we study it, we will assimilate it and we will organize the working class for a revolutionary victory.